Most of my life has been defined by trauma, loneliness, and despair, and darkness. But in 2017, I thought that was all behind me. Instead, that new chapter took a darker turn and went to a place so dark that nothing that came before it compared. And every time I thought I'd reached the bottom of it, it went deeper and deeper and deeper. This past spring, I began playing guitar, and the words that started coming out of my mouth took me to a place darker than anything I've ever experienced in my life. The experience of writing that song was, without a doubt, the most painful experience I've ever had. And for days afterwards, I was actually quite afraid that after all the healing and growth that I had accomplished was gone, and that I would have trauma deep within my soul for the rest of my life. But I decided to go back to that song that I wrote and understand it better and finish it. I decided that I refused to allow darkness to define that story, and the words that I wrote to conclude it and to explain the meaning of what happened are just, 10 or so lines. Are the most important words that I have ever written in my life. And so finishing that song, rather than traumatizing me, ended up healing me. And once the conclusion that I wrote, I realized I had come to the end of that story and was going to begin a new one. That new story didn't really begin until just recently, like within the past month or two. That's when the new story began. And I've been able to look back on everything and understand it better. And so I wanted to share those words that I wrote. But I was hesitant to include the rest of the poem because it is specific. It is about a specific person, and I don't generally think you should, share publicly certain stuff about people. But I realized that if I'm going to share those final words, which I need to do, I have to include the rest of it, because it's the rest of it that gives those final words. So why do I need to share it? Isn't it healing enough to just have written it and have that understanding for myself? The reason I feel like I need to share this story is because the feeling that when I would try to talk to people about what was happening, I realized I couldn't really communicate it, and in a way that people could actually understand. And so that feeling that I couldn't share this thing that was happening in my life had turned me into an utter recluse. I withdrew from human contact because if somebody were to ask me, how are you doing? Like, share, what's going on in your life? this wasn't just sort of this side thing. This was what this experience of facing the darkness defined me, defined my entire life. This wasn't just something that I would contemplate here and there and come back and revisit it. It was something that I could not. It's not something that I could compartmentalize, and so I want to share it because I need to share my story, and so sharing personal details about what that person did is not about exposing them. It's not about condemning them. It's actually about forgiveness and compassion, because it's a way for me to, so what this song / poem that I wrote, it spells out exactly everything that happened and why it happened and what it did to me, and how what happened made my life defined by darkness, a darkness so dark that it was traumatic. But I realized that you cannot fight darkness with darkness. You fight darkness with light. And light is so powerful. Darkness doesn't exist. It's not a thing. It's just an absence of light. A single spark in a vast universe of darkness is more powerful than that darkness, because it's something that's real. It's something, anyway. And so for me, I used to think of forgiveness as a sacrifice you have to make. It's like you want justice and you want to be able to say, no, that's not fair. You can't do that. I can't accept that. You have to say, God says, it's like, usually when you're trying to make a decision and it's a hard decision, when in doubt, it's the difficult solution that you should go with, just when in doubt. But I've come to realize now that forgiveness, I've heard people say forgiveness frees you, and that is true. But for me, the purpose of forgiveness is not for my freedom. My freedom is a byproduct of that. But the reason that I choose to forgive is because it defeats the darkness. I used to want justice. I think I've gotten that. But what I really want is for that darkness to be destroyed and defeated. And forgiveness does that. Forgiveness says, you know what? You don't have power over me. I don't care what you did. I choose to not let it define me. I'm going to be the one that writes the final word. I'm going to be the one that defines it. And I choose to define it by light. And all that light spills backwards in time onto that darkness. And so now the darkness of this story is not about the power of darkness. It's about the power of light. The greater the darkness, the greater, if the darkness is that great, then that light must be very powerful. And so, I'm not going to share the song or poem here right now. I just want to talk about it. I'm going to, share it on Facebook. And I've been very reluctant to do that because I think that people might read it and say that's inappropriate to publicly share, the negative things that Next did. I'm aware of that, but I think that my goal is not to expose somebody. It's to share my story, and it is my story. And the fact that this other person was part of that story after what they did, I don't think they deserve to be protected. Their actions to be protected, because we're talking about psychopathic behavior here that, if it's not exposed, will continue and grow. And so people think it's inappropriate. That's okay. What else? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And here's the other thing. I don't want to share this. The main purpose of me sharing it is not so that she ends up getting it. It's not like I'm posting it in hopes that a mutual friend will read it and show it to her. That's not my purpose. However, I have come to realize that actually that will happen. And I think that it will be incredibly good for her, because it means she's going to, the stuff that she's seen so far has been sort of explanations and metaphors and stuff, stuff that I've shared, a letter I wrote to her, and then a couple poems that I shared on Facebook that she may or may not have ended up seeing. Those were all like elaborate explanations and metaphor. This spells it out specifically. And at the end of it, after all of that horror, to read that and then to read those final lines of forgiveness, I think will make it all worth it. So anyway, those are my thoughts, and I'm back on doing YouTube videos again. I've been through a lot recently. It's been a very, very crazy journey. A life-changing experience happened recently. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Yeah.